Mic check at 1, 2.
Well, you know, I started taking notes. Then
Mic check 1, 2. Mic check 1, 2. Mic check 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
of the town of Kennebunkport on May 4th. This is a hybrid Zoom and in-person meeting. The Zoom information is out on the town's website if you need to call in. Anyway, first off, attendance, we're all here. We have 5 regular members and 1 alternate. So you won't get to vote, George, not that you're here. But that's the way it goes. You're used to that. So anyway, that's, the attendance is that. The first step is the approval of minutes. I guess Larry sent a bunch of little changes without telling us what they were.
Well, it's actually just one, well, I changed it one paragraph. It's in the Cape Porpoise Pier section, paragraph 14. The original wording in the minutes is, Mr. Simmons also suggested the applicant may want to consider 316L or duplex stainless steel fasteners, which have a greater resistance to chloride stress cracking and pitting, period. Mr. Baker explained metals for the connection typically are galvanized. So the proposed clarifying comment is, Mr. Simmons also suggested the applicant may want to consider 316L or duplex stainless steel fasteners, which have a greater resistance to chloride stress cracking and pitting than does 316 stainless steel. Mr. Baker explained that carbon steel metals for the connection are typically galvanized.
Okay, but in, the main difference is that's already been provided to Tricia.
Yes, I
And,
provided that to Tricia, yeah,
She's off to the opera tonight, but
Yep.
other than that.
yeah.
So, anyway, do we have any other changes or problems with the minutes?
No.
Okay, can I have a motion to approve them, please?
I'll move to approve
I'll
Okay.
second.
as amended.
Okay, and I'll take a vote here to approval of the minutes.
Aye.
Usually the 5
Yeah.
voting members all have approved it, so.
Okay.
That brings us to our agenda. Item number 1 is 220301, Brian Glazer and Michael Spinard, the Brian Bodett authorized agent. This is a public hearing on a site plan review for number 35 Langsford Road. So hopefully someone is here to
I'm
present.
Brian Glazer.
Yes. Okay. Is Mr. Bodett here?
He is not. He's available by phone or Zoom.
Is he on Zoom?
What would he do? Text him.
Um,
What's his name?
I don't see,
Brian Bodett?
I don't see Brian.
Let me text him.
Well, why don't we move on to the second item while you're locating Brian?
Mike Spinard has raised his hand in the audience. He's the other property owner, correct?
I can allow him to speak, or I can promote him to panelist.
Okay.
Which do you prefer? To see him or just hear him?
Either way, doesn't matter.
Yeah, I think you bring him in as a panelist.
Bring him in as a panelist.
Is that an issue if Brian can't be on?
No, as long as you're prepared to speak to the application, that's fine, yeah.
And speak to whatever questions might come up.
I'll do my best.
Yep.
It was my understanding this was
You
just going to be the.
you have to go to the
public-
podium. You gotta go to
Oh,
the
yeah,
microphone.
I'm sorry.
Nobody can hear you otherwise.
Okay. It was my understanding that at the previous meeting, Brian had answered a lot of technical questions on the plan, and this was just about public response.
This is about the public hearing about the plan, and any questions that the board or the public have about it.
Okay. I'll do my best.
So, my first one, given that I just finished reading the minutes again, was that Mr. Bodett agreed to have a, would supplement with an erosion control plan, and he would have Leon Blood prepare that. Have we seen that yet?
I don't know. I'm unaware.
So it doesn't sound like we're prepared to have this meeting tonight. I mean, he did promise that he would give that,
Yeah, I don't believe we
provide
received,
that.
yeah,
So
we
it has
did not,
been provided.
we didn't receive anything,
So,
an update on that.
so we.
However, it's, for all practical purposes, that's a note on the plan,
Yeah,
on the site plan.
So we
Yeah.
could have a public hearing,
We
but
could have the public
you may
hearing.
want
We
to
just-
continue it.
we would have to continue the public hearing to next time, because, and
Yeah, for the purposes
for
of
the purpose of getting
receiving
in.
that.
Yeah.
Yep.
But we could certainly, basically, why don't you describe what you're planning to do, and just for the people to.
Yeah, so what we're
what's
planning to
going
do
on.
is we're going to be tearing down the existing structure, which is about a 120-year-old summer cottage, because we struggled with whether to renovate it or to rebuild, because we plan to move up here full-time, and the house as it is now is not equipped to be a year-round residence, and we felt that the pitfalls and the code regulations in renovating an old house were just, potentially would not get us to the place where we wanted to be, which was to have a full-season house. So we're replacing the house with a modest 2,000 square foot home, very much in style with the houses on Langsford Road. And it's within all the code regulations.
And you're becoming less non-compliant. by
Less,
doing
yes, the house is very non-compliant right now.
It's
It's just-
still, yeah, but, so it's becoming less so, but I don't know that there's a way to build anything on that property that would be
Yeah.
fully compliant.
It's a
So
challenging lot, yeah.
Anyway, anybody on the
Yep.
board have questions, or,
I do have the application up if folks have questions.
okay, good. So, anybody on the board have any questions, Ed?
Not sure whether to bring it up now or later. Anticipating that we had answered most all of the questions, except those that might be brought up by the public, I had tried to draft a findings of fact to expedite the process. And in the course of doing that, I worked to come up with some words for a proposed condition. Last time the board discussed, we wanted to impose a condition as to the use of pesticides and fertilizers. And if it is going to be imposed as a condition, I wanted it to be specific. So I drafted some language. When I sent it out for review to the other board members, there was some concurrence, but there was a belief that the board should hear the proposed words and decide, do they want those specific words to be, and for you to hear them too, see if they're okay. So maybe this would be a good time for that. So if I go to the draft findings of fact, which nobody has here but me, I guess, I went to, it says, because this property is entirely within the shoreland zone, the applicant has agreed to restrict the use of lawn fertilizer and chemicals. Fertilizer and/or chemicals may not be applied within 25 feet of the normal high water mark. And beyond 25 feet, only low phosphate, slow-release nitrogen fertilizers can be applied. Now, I didn't get that completely out of my own head. I looked for some words that maybe had some precedence or had been used before, and this language is taken from the New Hampshire Shoreland Water Quality Act, Protection Act, excuse me. We don't have an analogous act in Maine. We certainly have the same spirit, but I couldn't find the words in a Maine law. Obviously, this wouldn't carry the force of that act. We're not in New Hampshire, but there is some rationale behind it, and it's been vetted. The thought was that, 25 feet, actually 75 feet in, you're in a setback area, and it makes sense. I used the 25 only because that was in the approved act for New Hampshire. And then low phosphate.
Land that is outside the 25 feet?
Outside. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, the whole thing is in shoreland within
Yes.
250.
Right.
But the 75-foot cuts like a third to a half way through the property. So the back part of it is 75 feet. which tells me probably about a quarter of it is within 25 feet or less, less than a quarter of it. A small part is within
Still a
25
portion
feet.
We don't want to see fertilizer.
Sure.
Yeah, so New Hampshire goes to some trouble to say, in that zone, they only want licensed people doing the application. They've got some enforcement structure, I guess, that goes with that. We don't have a counterpart to that, and we're not proposing that. But I wanted to put some structure to, rather than say, be careful with fertilizer. Instead, this gives you slow release, low phosphate fertilizer.
Yep.
Maybe you won't use any, I don't know, but that seemed to be specific. I leave it to the board. What do you think of those words? Are they okay?
I don't like them at all. They're way too specific. They're taking someone else's law that hasn't been approved by the town of Kennebunkport, that hasn't even been approved by the state of Maine. And when we ask people, or make a condition that they don't use fertilizers or pesticides, we're usually doing it because they're close to a body of water that's important, a wetlands, a river,
Yep.
the shoreland, and we know that things can move. The way people apply today, even the landscapers, apply pesticides and fertilizers, I've seen them be really sloppy. They're not going to measure 25 feet. I think that's asking too much for either the landowner or the applicator to start measuring out the lot and seeing where they could put things down. I think the idea is that in order to protect our shorelands and our resource protection zones and our bodies of water from fertilizers and pesticides that go right into basically the ocean and affect the fisheries and the lobstermen, you have to make a general, because we have that in 1010A, you have to basically keep your criteria general in order to get people to understand that you just can't put this stuff down. If you put it down just before it rains, and you've had no rain for a while, the stuff is simply going to wash down into the watershed anyway, whether it's 25 feet or not. It makes them think about applying or not applying, and I realize that there are enforcement issues here. Warner cannot run around and test soils and see what people are doing, but I think it's important to make people think about that, say, keep it off the lawn. No.
So what are you proposing?
I'm proposing we do what we have done before, and if they're in a shoreland or resource protection zone near vernal pools, that they restrain from using fertilizers and pesticides.
Entirely?
We have asked them to do it entirely, and I think that's the easiest way for people to think about it. Unless we decide to start putting something in front of the Board of Selectmen and ask the town to vote on it, we can't really make specific requirements on people. There are people who want to go ahead and propose a townwide ban on pesticides and the use of fertilizers. I know that that's something that people are working on through the Conservation Commission. We restrict our limitations to parcels that come before the planning board and parcels that basically have delicate situations. Water resources, shorelands, vernal pools. And I think that's okay under 1010A, where we can make restrictions because basically it's an important site. And it affects our natural resources.
I just want to make sure that whatever words we put in there are clear.
It's clear enough.
I don't want to levy a vague condition.
You're not levying a vague condition. When you put that one in there, you're basically saying we've made up our minds to make limitations and you have to measure your yard. And that's really asking people to do a lot.
I'm happy to remove the 25 feet and then just say only low phosphate, slow release nitrogen fertilizers can be applied.
That's very specific too.
Yes. What I'm not interested in doing particularly is banning the use of fertilizer.
Yeah.
I don't think that's within our purview, and it's not clear to me that it's proven necessary.
I think it is. I think it is. When you come into, where are we? Guidelines for decisions. Well, you got 1010AN, proposed use will have an adverse impact on significant scenic vistas or on significant wildlife habitat, which could be avoided by reasonable modification of the plan. And you are affecting wildlife if that stuff goes into vernal pools.
So I know that this is not a scenic vista.
Well, we're not talking
So I
about
don't
just
think- I don't
scenic
think that's-
vistas, we're talking about significant wildlife habitat. The other one is 1010B, where you're going into shoreland and resource protection zones, will not result in water pollution, erosion, or sedimentation, will not have an adverse impact on spawning grounds, fish, aquatic life, bird, or other wildlife habitat. And I think those are enough to say that you just don't put fertilizers and pesticides where there is a chance of runoff.
So this would be the first time, in my experience, that the board would ban the use of fertilizers in the shoreland zone. We have not done that before.
I believe we have.
I'm not aware of that.
My recollection is that you had language that talked about the use of organic products,
That's what I'm
but,
proposing,
yeah.
low phosphate.
And again, that, whenever I raise the point, I mean, my concern is just, is the practicality of it. I mean, the 20, when you get into very specifics of that nature, it's, I just see it as, one, as an enforcement issue, and two, I mean, it's, in my mind, it's not a practical follow-up, especially whenever you're.
And organics can be enriching as well.
Yeah, but I know that's what, what the board has done in the past. And I just, with these types of proposed restrictions, again, for us, as staff, we look at a project and say, all right, this is very clear, right? Here's what the building is, here's what the site's gonna look like, they meet the, they do that, when the permits are issued, inspections are done, and it's very clear. But managing human behavior, afterwards, is a bit of a, that's a bit of a wet noodle to try to grab.
I don't think there's any expectation that this would be something that the code enforcement office would need to follow up on.
Yeah,
But that's where it would land,
but that's where it would land,
yeah.
There
so,
was property, Cape Arundel by the pond, within the past year or so, locked it. And it was a tear down, and they bought the property, were building a house. And there was some language in there, both for protection of birds and for pesticides, herbicide, fertilizer. I don't remember what that language was. It was
Yep.
fairly simple.
I think it was the organic fertilizer.
Well, whatever it was, we ought to, I think it behooves, how often you get say behooves, it behooves the board to have consistent language, because if we have language that is applied differently onto every single property that comes before us where we make
Yep.
that addition, then I think it's easier to challenge and that we don't have a consistency on the language.
yeah,
It
and I
makes
think
it
it's,
feel like we haven't thought it through either.
So we could pull
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
FOF is easy enough to find out what we said at that time.
yeah.
Well, maybe. We should definitely look at that. But it may not be what the language we want either.
No, I agree.
Right, yeah.
But what other properties, I think was in that property, I'm trying to remember which other properties. we might
There were
have.
several others. There
I
were
think
several,
There were several others.
yeah.
There was another one down to Cape Port.
Is the board comfortable with levying a condition that the code enforcement office cannot follow up on? It really is a self-policing situation. One that if there ever were a problem exposed, there might be liability attached to the fact that that condition had been levied, but in practical terms, it's not something that the code police are gonna go seeking out.
And it is,
We could levy this, we could put this in as a finding and not as a condition and say, in the conversation, the homeowner agreed that they were going to not use fertilizer, or they were going to only use, and leave it as an observation.
We keep coming back to it. We don't have any clarity from the selectmen, from, legal opinion, it's just, but we're running into it more and more.
Absolutely.
Especially as more and more properties on marginal land are getting considered.
George, you need to put that mic a lot closer to you.
I'm sorry.
All right, thank you.
You're right. As the properties get closer and closer to wetlands, we are consistently trying to deal with that.
This is
And
gonna happen
maybe it's time for a legal opinion where we could get some language that covers what we want to do in 1010A and 1010B.
And in the meantime, these gentlemen are trying to build a house.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I think we could put in general language there, which basically says that don't use fertilizers, don't use pesticides. And we've already looked at the house in terms of the windows have screens, where, because you're in a bird-friendly area where you're going to get a lot of marine birds and so
Well,
forth.
interestingly enough, we have come to terms through repetition with the bird strike issue.
Yes.
And the language we're putting in there is very specific, and it's not in the land use ordinance, and it's not come from the selectmen, and it has been developed by the board, and now we're levying it consistently. It's quite specific.
It has to do with.
And now we're
structure.
using an argument that says, well, we don't want to do the same thing on fertilizer because it's too specific. I have a problem with that. It
No,
seems
because-
inconsistent.
Because you're taking some specifics and putting them in there that we've not agreed to, and you have to have some basis for what you're doing there. I'm not willing to take the basis of what the state of New Hampshire says about guidelines for how many feet there are before you get runoff. I want to see, if I see something like that, I want to see the state of Maine do it, or at least the town do it, and give me some guidance on what's going to be specific there. What we have asked is basically to curtail the use of fertilizers and pesticides in areas where the runoff clearly could happen.
So you just said something there that I didn't pick up on before, which is that we've asked to curtail it. I don't think we were that specific at the last meeting. I thought we said you were going to restrict it. You were going to be careful. You weren't going to do bad things. If we're saying you will not use fertilizer on your property, and the board agrees that's the condition, I think that's quite clear.
I don't remember the wording on that particular.
But I don't think that's what we
we've
decided.
gone back and forth on that wording. I think we've used it kind of
And
loosely.
one of the difference on like screens and overhangs for birds, that deals with the structure. This deals with the land and the resource
And the behavior.
and the behavior.
Yeah.
Well, keeping the screens up maybe.
And we
but-
don't have guidelines from the town or the state. But we have a sentiment enough so that people in the town are considering, a ban on pesticides or fertilizers, or
No.
I don't know how that.
So I wanted to start with a proposal of some specifics that
And
wasn't a total ban.
Certainly have stirred a pot.
I don't have problem with borrowing from an adjacent state.
Yeah.
Some may.
Well,
That's
yeah,
fine.
sure.
Could I just jump in for a second? So one of my concerns is how are you going to monitor this? You're going to have some kind of TV or some kind of camera observing each
Werner's taking care of that.
property?
That
Or
5G.
after every rainfall, you have to get a 1-gallon sample and send it to the DEP
We're
for
counting on
analysis,
the
or-
goodness of
or
their
if you have
behavior.
an algal bloom in the gutter, that's an
So
indication.
I
that
would,
you have
I
a-
would suggest just, a couple of things for this, for this conversation, because I don't know that we're not going to solve the issue, this evening, but as I had mentioned before, I think it's, this topic is important enough for us to have a separate workshop discussion on it, and I think, this type of proposed, call it a performance standard, and numerous other ones, that we've looked at and dealt with over, the past couple of years, we should look at, but maybe not necessarily in the context of a specific application, but more in terms of, here are these types of situations that we commonly come up against.
Yeah.
And, so where's our authority? What's the scope? How far can we go with this? And how are we going to be consistent, with with what we do. I mean, I think it's reasonable to, to have within a document recommendations for a property owner, that due to the nature of being close to the shoreline, the planning board highly recommends that you don't over-apply, and that you use, these types of products. I think that's fine to have in a set of findings as a written documented recommendation. But I just go back to, again, just, the practical piece of it and what is the expectation? So what do we do with that?
And the maturity of our thinking, too.
Right.
is part of it.
I think what we've heard and, as this conversation continues in town, the Conservation Commission, I know, just undertook a survey. And as I looked at the results of that, and there was a very clear component of that talked about educating people. That was our first step, was, the education piece of it before going into the realm of necessarily saying, we need to have something fully drafted and vetted out. And I think that having some educational language in there would be consistent with that direction.
Yeah.
But I think going
And I
so
think
far
in-
as to
In
make,
this case, probably avoiding fertilizers is something we recommend
right,
at this point.
yeah.
And so, is that okay, something like that? Ed?
So, yeah, what I'll propose to do, if the board agrees, is to remove this condition
Yep.
and add a finding in the findings of fact that
Right.
said,
Really-
the homeowner has agreed to restrict the use of
Fertilizer.
fertilizers and chemicals, given that it's the shoreland zone.
But when you say restrict, is that minimize, or is that just not used twice a year or something? I mean, how are you going to define restrict?
So I'm happy to add a recommendation if you can find one that,
How to define restrict in terms of pesticides and
well, I won't use the word
Fertilizers.
restriction. I'll,
minimize?
Well, I think there's a difference between a specific number and a standard versus you're talking about the spirit.
I think
know,
recommend
of-
care in
Recommend
the
care,
use
Yeah.
of,
like avoiding.
Yeah.
Restrict, avoid.
I'll come up with some words along those lines. And again, I
Okay.
think taking it out of the condition
Yeah.
Yeah.
allows us
No,
to
I
be
agree.
more general, avoids the concern of follow-up code enforcement with the army of two.
And you're okay with that?
Yeah, I mean, what if the property at 37 Langsford Road decides that they can just with abandon throw whatever they want to on the lawn? They have no such restrictions.
That's right.
That's correct.
Or what if they happen to own a pesticide company? And they feel like we are interfering with their ability to do commerce by restricting one property's ability to, so I think I think generalizations are good.
You want to be indemnified? Is that,
I don't know, but I mean, if someone wanted,
it is a concern.
it's bizarre times.
No.
So.
It's a tough problem.
General, and if we can get consensus from what other communities in Maine are doing, and legal opinion, and
Okay.
maybe this is something goes into the comprehensive.
But for this,
I'll
this
distribute
thing, I think
some
some nice general, yeah.
words
Okay.
later. Thank you, Tom.
Brief question from the, anything else from the board?
I do just want to, point one thing out. As I went and looked specifically at the application, we do have the erosion and sedimentation notes are on the plan.
They are on the
Yep.
plan.
They are.
Oh,
They weren't added, they were there before.
I haven't updated, but you really got to scroll in tight to look at it. You likely received it via email.
No, I'm just saying,
Oh, there.
proposed silt fence, this was on the original one
Right.
that came in the mail. So I'm not sure what else we were looking
Yeah.
for besides that.
And that's fine.
So it's fine.
That's what I
Yeah.
thought.
Okay, we're still not gonna read a finding of facts tonight.
Obviously not,
All right.
but we would like to have a public hearing.
I would like to have a public hearing if everybody's.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, I am going to open the public hearing on this 35 Langford Road. And anyone wish to speak on said? Or anyone out on the Zoom?
Yes,
Anyone
we have
using?
Kathy Jordan with her hand raised.
Okay,
Kathy can speak when she unmutes herself.
Unmute. Can you hear me?
We We can.
Barely.
We can? Okay. Brian, my question is to you. I saw very quickly the pages that Warner sent, and I was trying to look at them, but I couldn't look at them that quickly. It says, are you there? It says, you said that you are using this, you are going to use this primarily as a residence. Does that mean you're going to stop using your property as a VRBO when the new building is built?
In about 2 to 3 years, we plan to retire.
So you will be using it as a VRBO up until 3 years from now with more bedrooms and more bathrooms, so you'll be having more people?
No, we're going to restrict it as it is now to 4, maximum of 4 people.
How are you using it as a VRBO? Legally, may I ask?
Oh, yeah, for the past 10 years, we've been,
And
Right.
you have the right town permits for same?
yes, we do.
Another thing that I want to talk to you guys about a little bit is this conversation that you're having about the wetlands. Brian and Mike's house is pretty much landlocked. We own the property behind their house. So with regards to the organic fertilization and things like that, I think that's something that Brian and Mike and Bruce and I can sort of come up with in terms of strategies.
Makes sense?
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, we're willing to talk about it, yeah.
I think it might be easier, seeing that it's like kind of the 4 of us that are sharing that backyard.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, do you have any problems with the house other than?
Well, you know what, as I said, I just got these plans really quickly on my screen, so I haven't really been able, I did get copies of the last plans. It looked like facing our house, which I think we've got a 15-foot setback on the side, was a 1-story. It looks like now it's a full 2-story, which obviously isn't ideal because I'm going to be staring at a wall 15 feet from our setback. But hey, you know, it's what happened. It's what is happening on Langsford Road.
Yeah.
Brian, I do have one more question. The last house that you were, the last plans that I had, it looked like you were building your house 4 feet high because of flood zone, and I didn't see that on this plan.
I don't know the exact height, but I know that it is compliant, that, you know, it has been approved. I don't know the exact height, like I said. The previous house was going to be up on stilts.
Right.
This one is different. It will be on in a crawl space with the flood windows. I mean, I'm not an engineer, but
Okay, so it's not going to be as high. It's like
No.
the house across from John's that got built that's pretty high up. I think that's on stilts.
oh yeah, yeah. Is it? No, I think they have a partial basement, I believe.
Yeah, I don't know. Anyway, that's all I have to say. Those are my concerns, and I'm out.
Okay. So, do we have anyone else raising a hand? I guess not.
I see no other hands.
Thank you. Okay. Well, in that case, I will close the public hearing. Have any final comments from the board?
Just with regard to the VRBO status,
Yes.
that was something that didn't come up before. It is of interest to the board. I'm wondering, as a practice, is there a way to flag applications coming in through code enforcement if in fact there is on file a permit to use the property as a short-term rental?
Yeah, so we have a database,
Yeah,
of
yeah.
that, and if that's something that the board is interested in, we can give you,
I think we're
we can-
interested in
I
we
it.
can make a
would be.
list of those.
I don't like being surprised. This is the third time we've heard this particular house in front of this board. Okay, and hopefully this time they're actually gonna make a change.
But just now, this past year is when that database became available, right? So that's
Right.
kind of a new opportunity for us.
Yeah, and arguably for
awesome.
the purposes of this application, it's a replacement of a structure.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I think it's good information to know.
Especially when you get to the public hearing part of it,
But-
right? You know, and think about Langsford Road and all of the
Sure.
brouhaha
Yeah.
we've had there.
Yeah.
Is it a matter of flagging that for the board, or should it be a tick box on the application itself? Or is it not really up to the applicant, it's up to the town to make that determination?
Yeah, I mean, if that's information that the board, that the board wants to ask for, I mean, we can talk about modifying an application so that there's a checkbox for that, that would allow the applicant to say, yes, we're registered with the town as a short-term rental.
I think that'd be a good idea, because again, in 1010A, you have a lot of requirements about parking, about noise, about lighting and so forth, and
But,
all those things can be affected by short-term rentals.
Yeah, but understand that those types of items are not in the jurisdiction of the planning board. Those are governed separately in the short-term rental.
In the short-term
In the
rental.
short-term rental ordinance.
But we might want to know that there's enough parking, for example, if they're going to have somebody there.
Sure, yeah, and that's information that can be provided, that would have been part of their license application.
Yeah.
Yep,
Thank you.
yep.
Okay, so, we have a motion that this is ready to approve.
I'll make a motion that it can be approved with the amendments as we talked about them.
What amendments?
Well, basically, when we're talking about
Well, that's
this,
the FOF is separate.
the FOF is separate, but
Yeah, I don't wanna-
we're talking about asking them to cooperate basically on pesticides and fertilizers and so forth, where we didn't before.
Right,
So,
And not be a condition, right.
yeah.
right. Okay, so can I have a second?
I'll
on-
second that.
Okay, a second, so all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we've got unanimous.
So I'll have a findings
Okay.
for next time.
So we'll have a finding of facts next time, and it has to get
Okay,
Thank you.
signed and registered at the registry of deeds and such.
great. Thank you very much.
And, really do it this time. I don't want to
I
have
know.
you guys a fourth time,
Well,
okay?
COVID screwed it all up, and price of lumber, it wasn't feasible.
Oh, yeah. Getting worse.
Okay, well, that brings us to item 220302, Seashore Trolley Museum, public hearing. Now, the Sebago,
Yes, so Henry is in the audience.
okay, so he needs to be brought up as a panelist, because he's the representing the Trolley Museum. And we see the director back there, so. So when you need to speak, go to the mic.
Hello there.
Okay, so,
You guys able to hear me?
we can hear you just fine, yeah.
Yes, thank you.
So I guess, if you can just summarize the change for the public here, and then if we have questions, we'll ask some further questions.
Like, certainly summarize the project. So again, my name is Henry Hepp. I'm a landscape architect with Sebago Technics, and I'm here representing Seashore Trolley Museum. I believe Katie Orlando and Steve Berg. Katie Orlando is the executive director, and Steve Berg, the construction manager for Seashore Trolley Museum, are there in person tonight. The project is proposing a 3,000 square foot building on the existing campus, in a location of the campus that's currently an open grassed area. The building itself is a 1 to 2 story building, about a 1.5 story building, that is going to be built to house a model rail display component. There are a few other improvements to the site that will include some sidewalk access, some landscaping, as well as improvements to the existing parking area and parking lot to accommodate for ADA compliant parking spaces and allow for proper drainage of the site. water is currently proposed to come from an existing public well. And the bathrooms for the building shall be serviced by an existing, or by a proposed septic tank that will be pumped to a leach field, an existing leach field. Do have some visuals. I can actually share the screen here. Hopefully we're all seeing my screen. So I'll start here. This is currently the existing building that I will outline here. This is the existing visitor center at the Seashore Trolley Museum. And the proposed model rail building is going to be in this location down here. So that building is proposed across from the existing visitor center with some sidewalk access as well as some improvements to the parking area there. I know we also have the architect in person this evening who might be able to speak briefly to the interior floor plan as well as some of the exterior of the building as well. But I'd be happy to either hand that over to Herb himself if you'd like to discuss that a little bit, or I could turn it over to the board for any comments or questions.
Well, we all saw it a couple weeks ago now. Do we need further presentation, or do you want to ask some questions?
A couple of weeks ago, one of the things that seems to be missing here is you asked for an authorization, agent authorization, and I still haven't seen that come in. Was there one sent?
This is the original.
Do we have one?
Final signed agent authorization ever did get sent to the board.
Okay,
we have it.
that's what I wanted to make the application complete. No, I did take a site visit out there and look at where the building was going and its proximity to other parts. And I'm satisfied with that. So I do want to point out that the application in some places says 3,500 square feet and in other places says 3,000 square feet, but the building is 3,000 square feet. To clarify that? And that's all.
Yeah, that's a great comment, Nina. The building footprint in case is about 3,000 square feet, whereas some of the interior space, including the half story of the upstairs, kind of accounts for that first floor and then that mezzanine level upstairs as well. So that you're getting your outside exterior footprint is 3,000 square feet.
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, anyone else have comments? Okay, I guess I'd like to open up the public hearing if there's anyone in the public that would like to talk about this new item. I don't see anyone here. Is anyone trying to get in on Zoom?
No remote attendees have their hands raised.
Okay. Well, then I'm going to close the public hearing.
Okay.
And
So I would propose to approve the application.
okay.
And I'll second that.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous?
Okay.
Okay. And you read the
I,
epilogue next time?
I can read it now or I can read it the next time. It's fine. I can read it the next time if we want to go ahead with the pier.
Why don't we go ahead?
I think
with
if
the
we
pier
read it tonight, I think we're going to run into the same language in the conditions that we just bantered about.
That's true.
Okay.
That's
I don't
true.
think we want to do
Yeah,
that.
so we'll read the finding of facts next time.
Yeah, okay,
But you guys don't actually need to be here to listen to the finding of facts, but you're welcome.
okay.
All right, that brings us to the pier. So this is item 220303, Town of Kennebunkport, GEI Consultants. And we have so introduce yourself again, Mr. Baker.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Good evening. My name is Barney Baker. I'm a civil engineer with GEI Consultants, Portland, Maine. And I've been involved with this project for several years. It's the rehabilitation of the Cape Porpoise Pier facility. And I've worked closely with town staff in the development of this project, and they are represented here tonight. The town manager, Lori Smith, is here. The Public Works Director, Chris Simeone, is here. The Harbor Master, Chris Mayo, is available. The town engineer, Eric, is here. And we have, I know in the audience, several fishermen as well. So I would encourage the board and the public to, ask any questions that they want to. I'm not going to go through the presentation that I did last time again. I did provide some additional information as requested to the board, and I can run through that quickly. And that material I can just kind of paraphrase it. You'd asked for what we were going to do to bird-proof the bait shed building windows, and I pointed out that there are two types of windows on the facility. There are double-hung units with exterior screens, and those windows don't need any bird-proofing. And that we do have some fixed and awning units that the operable ones have interior screens, but those windows, what we propose to put on those is bird decals. They're kind of an ultraviolet sensitive decals that are translucent. You can see them if you look closely, but the point is that the birds also see them and are smart enough to avoid flying into the windows as a result. The pier lighting, that's a performance space specification, but it's to the town standards for dark sky and lumen coverage. We're actually going to get the consultant supplier that the town uses to specify those lights. That's how those lights will be defined. But obviously the purpose of the lights is to make the pier safe for use by the fishermen, but also to comply with the dark sky requirements. Just point out, we did the same thing for the government wharf facility when that facility was done. Sanitary service, you asked for a letter from the Public Works Director indicating that there was sufficient capacity. Just point out that the restroom that we're putting into the facility is for the harbor master / pier manager. Public restrooms are provided in the chowder house. The design life for the facility was a great question, and I provided some background for that. Just to read what I said, the Cape Porpoise Pier facility is designed with consideration of the marine exposure of the site, that be wind and wave action, and the daily use by an active fishing fleet, obviously wear and tear, boats coming in. Materials must consider the resiliency in a harsh marine environment, the wear and tear associated with heavy use by the fishermen, and the relative ease and cost of periodic maintenance. So the pier facility that is going in is, uses standard for the Maine coast materials, and the life expectancy of those materials varies depending on their location. Fender piles are exactly what they are. They provide fendering against the pier for the boats when they come in. They line up against the fender piles. Those life cycle on those is estimated to be 10 years. The timber decking, which stands a lot of abuse, vehicles driving on it, equipment, that has a life expectancy of 20 years. The pier support piles, that would be the piles that are underneath the pier. They're protected against boats hitting them, and obviously they're very difficult to replace because the pier is constructed over the top of them. Those life expectancy of those is 50 years. And reinforced concrete foundations, which would be under the bait building. That would also be 50 years. The steel guide piles that are used to support the floats that extend to the south, those are big floats and they need to be rugged piles. I'd put a 25-year life on those. What we look at is the thickness of the steel and determine the corrosion rate. Those are also filled with concrete, so they're quite rugged and more expensive than timber piles. And then the floats, which are a moving part. Anything that moves on the water gets wear, and what happens with floats is, as I'm sure Chris will tell you, there's components of the floats that need to be replaced and fixed, after a storm. But generally the floats, if looked after, will last about 15 to 20 years. So that's the life cycle that was requested. And then a gentleman asked a very interesting question about the site exposure for wave action. And the town commissioned Ransom Engineering to do a special, what's called a LOMAR, a letter of map amendment. And that is a undertaken in accordance with a national insurance program, National Flood Insurance Program. But that is a study that looks at the seabed contours and approach to a site along a certain transect, and Ransom drew a transect right through the pier, so that they looked seaward in, I think, at least two directions. And what they did was they took that geomorphology and plugged that into their very complicated model that FEMA uses, and calculated what the storm surge was, the predicted tidal elevations based on planetary motion, and kind of put that all into the model and came up with a base flood elevation for the site that considers all these features. And the base flood elevation is based on a 1% probability of a storm in that combination actually occurring. So that's where you get your 1 over 100 or 1% 100-year base flood elevation. And so we took that information and plugged that into a kind of wave height, which we consider on the pier and on the structure that is the bait shed also. So that is a way to design a facility with a factor of safety. In our case, we use a factor of safety of approximately 2. And then we generally look at the probability of a higher flood event occurring, and we see what the factor of safety is on that. The building is designed, if a very large wave does occur, the building is designed to have collapsible panels so that the wave would not place its full impact on the building, but would kind of wash into the building. That's kind of an extreme event. We hope it never happens, and I think we have several fishermen here tonight who can speak for previous generations, and what that collective wisdom and experience provides is they're able to answer the simpler question: how high has the water occurred in a storm event that has occurred previously on the coast at this location? So we take all that into consideration when we're designing the facility. And thank you for letting me explain that. And my screen has gone blank. So let's see. I think I addressed everything that I had in the memo. I believe I did. So another thing that's coming to my attention today, and I know it's going to come up, so I wanted to be up front and center about it, is I got a note back today saying that your building is too high. It maxes out at 20 feet, but in fact it's 23 foot 4 inches high. And why is it so high? Well, it's a two-story structure. The harbor master's building, by virtue of the flood elevation for the site, has to be on the second floor, as does all the refrigeration equipment and any sort of electrical source. So that's really why the building is as high as it is. It's a two-story building. So the ordinance performance standard basically says that any pier, any building that is on a pier or adjacent to a pier cannot exceed 20 feet in height. Actually, other buildings in the zone of which this site is located can be 30 feet in height. So our interpretation of the code is based on experience with other coastal properties that we've looked at. And when we read the ordinance that said a building on a pier or adjacent to a pier can't be larger than 20 feet in height, we understood that to mean that a pier building that was actually located on a pier would be limited in height, and a pier that is on piles and over the water and also adjacent to a pier would also be limited in height. With the height restriction being applied because of the proximity of the structures to pile-supported structures on the coast that periodically need to be maintained and need to be looked at and subject to deterioration, with piles or dunnage getting under the pier and causing damage, that sort of thing. But I just point out that our pier building, the bait shed, is entirely landward of the elevated structure, of the pile-supported structure. It's entirely put on concrete foundations that have frost walls. So in my understanding of the standard, it's a building that is in the upland. It's not in any form over the water. So that's our kind of interpretation, and you know, others may speak to that.
Yeah, I can
Also.
just add to that, you know, the section of ordinance that's quoted there, so 511, you know, I think the first piece of it is you have to look at the title of that section of the ordinance, and that very specifically talks about a structure that extends over or below the normal high water line. And, you know, the bait shed doesn't fall into that category. It's not a structure that, you know, that extends over or below the normal high water line. Now, the wharf that's out on pilings, very clearly, that falls into that category. But the bait shed itself doesn't fall into that category because it doesn't extend over or below the normal high water line or being within a wetland.
So that would mean that the 30-foot
30-foot height limit
limit would apply to Cape Porpoise Square.
for the bait shed.
Yes.
'Cause
For the structure that's 23 feet high.
correct.
Yeah. The one that's in question.
Yeah, as I'm looking at the title of that section of the regs, of where that performance standard is located, and that standard is identified for structures that extend over or below the normal high water line.
Okay,
So the wharf and the bait shed are two separate structures. They're not, they're arguably close with each other, but, you know, they don't rely on, you know, the bait shed doesn't, you know, as Barney has pointed out in his designs, you know, it's an independent structure that's built on.
so I think the wording in that section 511 refers to the average original ground level. And, you know, I think that drawing B3, if you had some dimensions on there, it would be a little more clear on what you're doing, because it would be great if you would show original ground level, average ground level, and then the elevation of the top of the vintage ridge cap. I mean,
Yeah.
To me, I measured this, okay, I know I don't have all the information you have, but
23 foot 4
it
inches.
seems to me that the elevation of the vintage ridge cap was elevation 44.7, and the pier elevation was 14.7, which I know is, okay, now I know it's a separate situation. Okay. But if you'd added the reference elevation of the original average ground level, then that would clarify where the 30-foot limit would be. That's what I'm saying.
Right. I mean, the pier has been, you know, developed over time, and it is just like Government Wharf is, a filled structure.
But we're just talking about the bait shed right now. So if you would add on this drawing B3,
Yeah.
what is the elevation of the original average ground level that you're taking the measurements from, and that would show
So-
the 30-foot limit. And you could
Right.
even show a 30-foot limit on the drawing.
Sure, yeah, no, what I did was I took I measured the distance from the peak of the
Yeah.
building, and I measured it to the top of the timber pier. The reason I did that is because currently what you do is you drive right out onto the pier.
Okay, well, when I do that, I get 30 feet from the pier surface to the top of the vintage ridge cap.
So
Just take another look at those dimensions.
okay, I think I must be misleading you with
Yeah, but if
some
you
of the
just-
dimensions.
I mean, you know, yeah, just clarify. Just add
Okay.
some dimensions on this, that would fix it.
Right, I measured it before I came tonight physically,
But if
and,
you would just add that information on the drawing.
okay, yes,
that
no,
would be
I will
great.
do that,
Then we don't have to talk about it, okay?
yeah.
So, and I appreciate you looking into the, you know, I appreciate the storm analysis that you did. But could you give us some actual numbers? I mean, the base reference elevation is what, mean low water or low water? And then you build up from there. So what are the various, you know, tides plus storm surge plus wave height that you came up with?
So the report has very detailed information in it, and I can provide that to you.
That would be great, yeah.
Yeah, it's the design wave height is, I believe, is 5.5 feet.
Yeah. Okay,
Yeah,
and that is the significant wave height, right?
I believe so.
Okay.
It's, yeah,
I came up with the same number essentially. So the significance, of course, is then that determines the D50 rock size you need for your riprap that you're gonna have, right?
right.
And they ran some numbers on that too, and it gets quite heavy. So you may wanna just look into that, be worthwhile
Yes.
determining what the D50 rock size. And, I mean, I can, based on my quick review, it seems like you're talking about the D50 of rock size of maybe 3.5 feet in diameter, weighing about in excess of 1.5 tons, and that's for acceptable damage. You'll still get damage.
Yeah,
If you want zero damage, then it gets much heavier, much bigger than that. So we're in the same ballpark in terms of wave height. Yeah, just take a look at what that does to your riprap rock sizes.
right. So for the rock slope, we're actually using granite blocks that are left, that the town has from, in their, on their public sites. So those granite blocks are, exceed that 3.5 foot dimension.
That's right, yeah.
In addition, they'll be placed, they'll be machine placed so that they'll, essentially, the analogy would be building a wall on its side, much like they do up in the port.
That'd be great, yeah.
Yeah,
Good.
so the issue is to make that very resilient, and certainly the D50, which is the definition of 50% of the material diameter,
Yep,
would exceed that
wonderful.
number.
Yeah, okay. Sounds like you got a handle on it, so.
Trying to cope, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Okay, all right, so then in terms of the application, I did have a few other questions. So the first one is on the agent authorization. Of course, I know Lori Smith, everybody knows Lori Smith as the town manager, but since this document that we've prepared, or that you've prepared, is for anyone who may want to review it in future who doesn't necessarily know all the personalities involved, could you clarify that Lori Smith, town manager on behalf of town of Kennebunkport, or on behalf of Board of Selectmen, whoever is actually authorizing the work, just clarify what Lori Smith's,
Yeah, that seems to be an
Roll is-
easy fix.
yeah, it'd be easy, yeah, but just, I'm saying, just for completeness, be very useful.
Okay.
Then on page 7, you refer to Kennebunk Standards Review. Of course, it's actually Kennebunkport,
Ouch.
and I mean, that's, that's an easy fix, but,
Yeah.
and then, okay, and then I saw it where, last time we talked, you had, there's a whole bunch of, permits you're pursuing or have received. Anyway, in your application, you just mentioned DEP and Corps of Engineer permits plus the submerged lands lease
Yeah.
that you did there, you did include, but then I think we talked about the Water District, Kennebunkport Wastewater District, Maine State Fire Marshal, and of course the Corps of Engineers.
This is all part of the actual, not this plan, but the actual site.
Yeah, the fire marshal's permit, they'll be part of the,
Okay.
they'll be part of the building permit
So it's-
app.
So it's coming, all right. And so then that led me to wonder, have you had a chance to talk to the fire marshal here at all?
So the fire marshal gets a copy of the application. Is that right, Werner?
That's correct, yes, yeah. I mean, we talked to, we spoke with Jay about that, about the project and had no concerns with it.
Does he want to have any sprinkler system or anything in this building, the bait shop?
Well, so the sprinkler requirements are up to the jurisdiction of the state fire marshal's office.
Okay,
And so that, if there's a requirement for that, that gets covered under the under the marshal's permit.
Okay, so that's still to be determined, so we're not concerned with that. This is gonna come in the future, right?
Yes.
That'll be addressed prior to the issuance of the building permit.
All right. And then, I really was glad to see you had the ADA provisions, you got that ramp there. And it made me wonder, when you, if a storm is predicted, is that ramp gonna be removable in order to minimize damage, right? So, if it is, do you need someplace to lay it down? Do you need a storage area for any of the facilities you're providing?
So we actually are putting a dedicated hoist on the end of the pier
Great.
that it's alongside, so Chris can time it. He obviously wants to leave it in till the last minute so that people can use it, but that can be lifted up,
Okay.
so
All
it
right.
doesn't get damaged.
Okay.
They're very heavy gangways that long, so they're typically not removed from a facility.
Okay.
They're just lifted clear of
Lifted
the,
up. Cleared up, okay.
Yeah.
Lifted up. I got you, okay. And then I did see where one of the respondents, one of the butters wanted to talk about a camera.
Yeah, we'll get to that when we have the
Okay, all right, gotcha, okay,
public hearing.
all righty. I think that's it. I appreciate it, thank you.
okay, thank you.
Okay, anybody else? Ward?
There's just a mention, excuse me, there was just a mention of ADA on the ramp. I can't recall, what provisions for parking, ADA parking have been made, are being made as part of this?
Well, that's a great question. Our position has been that we're not changing the use of the facility. We're not changing the number of people that are using the facility. So we're just kind of rehabilitating what's there. So we haven't generated a parking plan. So my answer to that would be the ADA space that's down there would be the same tomorrow as it is today. So we haven't identified where that's located. I know that the parking up there, and folks can speak to this. The parking up there is there's a gravel area, so it's not specified. That's where I would probably put the ADA parking is up. So that it can be used by folks using the Chowder House or coming to visit the park. If parking is required adjacent to the pier, it's a very kind of premium area, and the fishermen themselves kind of coordinate how that parking is kind of used each day. And so if there's a need for an ADA space, they would very likely create that within their parking area for use by them. Does that answer your question?
It sounds like you're ignoring the issue. Basically, you're saying the parking is grandfathered, we're not touching it. But I'm not sure that that's true.
So we currently have handicap parking at the parking lot as a public entity that has public parking. We would be continuing to maintain the parking that we have.
That didn't
We're
jump
not
out in the plans at all.
It's not in the plans because we didn't provide a parking plan, since we didn't change that.
Oh, I thought you chipped away at the parking that was there by extending the building footprint.
No,
No, the building footprint is the same as it is now. It's gotten, the only change in the building footprint is we're providing a covered walkway on the north side.
I'm going to have to go back and look at that, I guess. Thank you.
Okay.
So could I just had another Another couple of questions on permits. So do you need a permit from the Maine Department of Inland Fisheries or the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service for this?
So both of those agencies have the ability to comment on the project, and they have.
Okay.
They are in the family of state agencies that DEP reaches out to.
I got you.
And, their NRPA permit has provisions for connecting with those agencies.
Great, thanks for
Yeah.
that, yeah.
Okay. Anyone else?
Well, I just wanted to say that I also had questions about the parking, but it didn't seem to be an issue. I mean, it was just like, okay, we're not changing, so.
Yeah, I'm nervous, though, that we're changing the use. We're basically making this a more efficient, more desirable operation. I know I raised a question the last time about the potential for more users, and got an answer that seemed reasonable, that there weren't any more moorings being added, but in fact, there is, likely to be an increased activity. It's going to be more appealing to tourists and the like, and so it just feels like a mistake to me to not at least look at the parking as part of this. And if the answer comes back that we're not touching the parking, this parking, is grandfathered, then so be it. But I want to at least think about that. George, you have
I'm wondering, how is it a change of use?
it's an expansion, isn't it, of the existing use, an improvement of it? It's adding a story to it. It's making it a more efficient operation.
Well, my interpretation of this was an improvement, an upgrade of an existing facility,
An upgrade. Thank you.
but you're not really expanding its use, so I just ignored the whole parking issue as no change.
Okay.
I mean,
Yeah, you have a
that was-
replacement, you've got a replacement of an existing structure.
That's the way I
So,
looked at it, yeah.
you have some volumetric increases.
Yeah.
But, the harbor master's office already exists.
Exactly.
And that's going to remain, as well as the bait storage, which also currently exists.
So you would agree, Werner, that this is not an
It's
expansion?
not an expansion of the use. Again, there's some volumetric, but as far as, what you have, I mean, I think, I don't know that I would classify, a covered walkway, or some extended, or an increase in some of the wharf area.
I know we have more tie-ups and
Yeah.
the like.
I mean, that's in and of itself, that wouldn't trigger, the type, the question that you're asking.
The recreational boating.
Yeah,
Yes.
I mean, that's already, something that occurs there.
I think you're just encompassing ADA facility and encompassing, more tie-ups and so forth, but I wouldn't call it an expansion of use because you're not extending it out anymore.
Correct. Yep.
So you would agree that the current parking is okay as is?
Well, I think it's something that should be looked at, but I don't think I would call, this an expansion where you are required to look at the parking. I think you're encompassing ADA individuals, but that doesn't mean you have to provide more parking spaces since you're not expanding its use. You're just encompassing something that hasn't been there before, trying to, like most facilities, trying to make them more compliant and more easy to use for ADA individuals. That doesn't mean you're going to get more ADA individuals, but just make it easier for them to use it. Have I made any sense at all? You're looking very confused.
I didn't really understand the last point, but I'm
Okay.
willing to.
All right.
Well, okay,
Back off.
but from the standpoint of, moving forward, are we going to require some traffic or parking assessment before we say okay on this? I mean, are we gonna make the approval contingent on a parking or study?
So I will, I think there are plenty of folks in the room here that can speak to how the pier operates in terms of the parking. My observation has been is that they've made it work for many years. And, I think I would simplify it as that it's not broke. we have in the past, the town has looked at, what would this look like if you applied a parking standard to it? And the reality of it is that you lost a significant amount of usable space there trying to, if you took a performance standard approach to it, that would have some very dramatic effects to that. And so to answer your question, it's been looked at. It's been looked at in terms of that question of circulation. But because of the way that, the pier operates, it's functioned fine. Again, I would argue that this doesn't necessarily, where there's no increase in the use in terms of, that you're not adding any additional bait storage, you're not adding, there's no additional moorings or anything else of that nature. And it's, again, arguably not part of the application for the replacement of the buildings. But I can tell you that, the town looked at it, a number of years ago and came to that conclusion that, attempting to apply, what you would have would be a typical parking lot standard, just wouldn't work in this situation.
So for purposes of this application, the parking is a moot point. We're just, yeah, okay, good.
I think that's what we're agreeing.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Okay. Other than parking, do we have any other
I
questions?
just had a quick question, because I get a little confused about, the standard on deck boards and so forth. It says a maximum of 6 inches in width for deck boards and spaced half an inch apart. But it looks like you got an awful lot of deck boards in there, and I'm just wondering how that works.
So
And are they spaced apart?
The ADA standard is that the gap, I think, can't be larger than 3/8 of an inch. So in reality, the deck boards are placed very close together, if not touching, because they shrink with time. So why do we use deck boards? Some piers are constructed with a concrete deck. But the advantage of the deck boards is they're a nice material that's easily kind of modified or fastened to, and very easily maintained and repaired. So it's and timber is very strong and forgiving. So I don't want to be accused of dodging the question again, but does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so, except there's a standard there, and you're saying the ADA standard is different. Is that only in the ADA compliant part, or is the whole thing ADA compliant?
We try to make the pier ADA compliant where it is going to be used by persons with disabilities. And so, quite frankly, that could apply to recreational users. It could also apply to the harbor master. It could apply to the pier manager. It could apply to the fishermen. So the answer is we provide that where we can, we apply the standard to the entire facility.
Okay, that answers my question.
Okay. So, any more questions from the board? Okay. Well, I'm going to open up the public hearing if people would like to speak on this topic. I'd just like you to go up to the microphone and identify yourself. And
my name is Richard Perry. I live at 1 Stonehaven Hill in Cape Porpoise, and I'm here to I have the good fortune of looking at the pier every single day, and I wholeheartedly support this project. I think the pier is important to our town. It's an important asset that we need to maintain and improve, so that's pretty much my statement. I did arrive slightly late, and sorry. And I did miss the dark skies discussion about the lighting, because that is my only concern. Would you indulge me and just tell me what that actually entails? Because we do have concerns about light on the effects on wildlife and on our lives.
Sure. So Thank you, that's a great question. So if you wanted to look at the lighting, you could go to the Government Wharf facility, which is on the river. That's in place, and there, what we did was we put lights up high on, we extended the piles up on the face of the pier, but then we shoot the lights down so that they have a dark sky component. They're actually screened so that they don't send light out where it's not needed. So where the light is needed is, obviously we want to light the pier face for the folks that are working on it. So if you viewed the facility, you would see light, but it wouldn't be shining towards you. It would be on the surfaces of the pier that are being used.
So it sounds like you're suggesting there will be more lights than what we currently have.
The lights will comply with the town standard for lumen coverage. I haven't done an assessment of the existing lights to see what that is, but for the safe use of the pier, we'll apply the town light standard, which is dark sky, no lights projecting up, and lumen coverage that doesn't exceed a certain criteria.
So I have read a little bit on dark sky, and I think I understand that.
Come up to the mic, please.
Sorry. I think I understand about dark sky that it not only talks about how far out the lights project, but it talks about lights on timers, particularly in working areas where there's not a need for light at all times. Has that been discussed?
So, Chris, do we have the lights on timers now?
There is a timer.
Chris,
There is currently an aging timer that is not functional on the light that faces down to the dinghy dock that is mounted on the corner of the building. And I think that's the light that you probably see, would be my guess.
Yes. Well, Chris, I actually see all the lights, but I guess my only point is that it would be so sensible just to have lights that are either on timers or on motion, because when the guys aren't there, they don't need the lights on. And, so I have no problem with work lights to assist them when they're at the dock, but I think we should make an effort not only to save the energy, but also to demonstrate best practices with regard to that sensitive environment. Other than that,
Wildlife would like that too.
well, yes, I mean, that's a big part of why I'm making the point. So I just wanted to be on record as expressing that concern, but otherwise I'm in full support of this project. Thank you.
hey, thank you.
Sorry to jump in here, but I think my remarks are a good follow-on to the remarks from the gentleman from Stonehaven. I totally agree with
Identify
his.
yourself, please.
I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. My name is Dave Perloff. My wife and I own the abutting property at 75 Pier Road. So we're right next door to the pier and very familiar with the traffic and the activity, not only parking related on land, but on waters. It's a complex situation there, and I'm hopeful that what you said will be improvements in terms of utilizing the much longer face of the pier will in fact turn out to be that way. But in any case, I like the project. Nothing's perfect. It looks like something that was really worked out with everybody's input, most importantly the fishermen. I do want to, though, return to the question of parking. Sorry, I realize everybody thought that was addressed. And here's what I want to kind of challenge you with. At some point, the current buildings come down. So you've got to have a replacement for the bait shack on a temporary basis, right? And the harbor master needs to be housed. And the construction company is going to bring in space for their engineers and workers. And so my question is, has that been factored in the interim before the completion of the project? Because of the potential for putting a lot more pressure on parking over the, maybe a 2-year cycle of building out the plan.
Yeah. So, David, thank you, and it's a great opportunity to see you. I talked to you on the phone, but I didn't realize it was you. It is a tight site, and construction phasing is a very important issue. And the one player that we don't have on our team is the contractor. We will have the contractor when the project is put out to bid, and then we'll have the ability to indicate or to meet regularly and to talk through their program with them so that we alleviate any concerns that develop at the site. I can tell you that the project will be constructed in the winter months when the facility is not in kind of summer mode. The two things, the number of fishermen drops. Not all of them fish all year round. And also the summer residents are, a lot of them will be away, and certainly the Chatter House, I think, closes for the season. So a lot of the activities that draw people to that site will go away. But nevertheless, David's absolutely right. It's an incredibly tight site. We have spent a lot of time looking at phase construction alternatives, and we will be putting provisions in front of the contractor to both keep a certain amount of waterfront available for the fishermen to use while their construction's going on. And we've also looking at bringing in refrigerated trailers to house the bait and help the fishermen through that. A lot of people are going to have to work together to make this happen. I'd like to say we could do a plan that is going to be easy for everyone to kind of look at and stay out of their way, but the reality is that the contractor who gets the job is likely going to have to provide space on a barge and temporary landing on a barge. And we have talked to some contractors and gotten their ideas in that regard, but again, you have to trust the integrity of the harbor master, the pier managers, and the fishermen. Quite frankly, it is going to take the contractor will be required to coordinate his activities with the other operations on the pier. There'd be a blanket statement like that in the contract documents, along with some provisions for keeping certain wharf available. But what it really comes down to is people getting along during the construction process.
So we've had construction projects at our home here in Cape Porpoise and in California running concurrently over the last 30 years. I don't think we've ever had a project that's been completed on time. And without the contractor being distracted for all the right reasons, but it's a fact. And I'm just, as somebody who deals with getting things done on time so businesses make money, I'd just like to see a little more of that injected into this so that there's specific penalties for the contractors if they can't work November to May and actually complete a unit of the project that allows you to put the next phase of adapting to the construction. I think it could go on for, without any recourse. And I'm sure it's hard to make a contract that airtight now because contractors are in demand. But it seems to me if you don't want this to go 5 years versus 3 years or whatever it is, it's got to be injected up front. So I want to comment on the cameras. I don't know whether the PowerPoint presentation I sent over actually got in there, but I can talk to it, though.
Yeah, we gave that to all the board members, so that
Okay.
was passed along to them.
So let me tell you what my thinking is on this. The idea of putting webcams in a heavily used commercial and recreational area is like, we shouldn't even be talking about it. But what got me thinking was the plan that you've offered and the opportunity for the harbor master to have viewpoints through windows. Kind of suggests that why not supplement with cameras so that when Chris isn't available there, he can take his cell phone out and basically look at all points of view of the pier, the project as it goes on, at a very low cost. So rather than retrofitting this, after we put the building up, we'll worry about webcams, actually use them in the course of construction. Now, there's one other thing I've added in, which I think does make it really interesting. Pinkham Island, I think was called Negro Island back in the earlier maps. But if you look at the Kennebunkport Conservation Trust map, it's called Pinkham Island. That island is 400 feet from the pier face. It's the perfect spot for a webcam on a mast that can give you, now if you had 3 on the structure that's replacing the bait shack and the harbor master office, you get views 360 degrees, high resolution, at very low cost. But the time to do that, particularly, and the way I would see it done is you've got a trench across the channel, the 400 feet, run Ethernet and power, otherwise you have a very unreliable system. And that can be done, you've got a construction activity going on, I don't know if you need a permit from the state or whatever, but you'd end up with something concurrent with the start of the project. I mean, it shouldn't take more than a few weeks to get these webcams up and running and provide an extra layer of oversight as to what's happening. So that was the point about the cameras.
All right. I mean, you've told the people that count about it, and, wouldn't come into a site plan one way or the other, so.
Can I just add to what Tom's saying there? That isn't something that normally is within the planning board's purview, but within our role as providing a public forum for review of projects of this ilk, I think it's perfectly appropriate, and at least this member of the board thinks it's a great idea. I love the idea of having it there for the monitoring of the construction itself, let alone subsequently and all. I think you'd have support from tourism, you'd have support from law enforcement, likely from the harbor master as well. I think it's a swell idea.
Well, Mr. Daggett's cameras are already strong.
Microphone.
I'm sorry. The cameras that are there currently, I frequently look at them. From California, I want to see what's happening.
Of course.
But they are not quite at the level, I think, of what we're talking about. And it's really going to take some professional to come in and talk about how do you set these cameras up? Should you be able to rotate them, zoom? I mean, you don't want to get it too complicated, but there are times where you may want to zoom in on a particular part of the pier, and you say, well, we could have done that for a couple $100 more. I don't think it's something that I or anyone who's played with webcams should be responsible for. You get a company that does this professionally and on projects like this.
Thank you.
A question for the construction, though. If permits with the Army Corps of Engineers and Fisheries and so forth are already in the works, would you be required, if you're going to run an Ethernet cable, to get a modification of those permits?
That's what's known as a Section 8. And it would have to be approved by the navigation branch, which is not through the main project office. It's in the New England division, which is in Boston.
What kind of time would you estimate?
I don't know exactly. It really depends on how they view it, but what a Section 8 does is it just looks at any obstruction in the channel. And so they might have some special requirements for it, or, have worked through it before. So I can't, I've never done that before. I would say that Mr. Perloff's concerns about the construction going on past the time frame that's required for a project of this type, which is going to have state and federal funding, there will be liquidated damages associated with going over the limit on the contract.
There will be penalty clauses.
It's a penalty, yeah. It's very rarely applied. I mean, most times when a contractor goes over, it's because of bad weather or some other event. They're generally, particularly in Maine, non-unionized, but they're very hardworking and very proud. So they generally get the job done.
I believe there's other gentlemen.
Yeah, my name is Peter Eaton, and I've been fishing out of Cape Porpoise for almost 60 years. The last time that we rebuilt that pier, it's just about in the same time frame that we're going to do now. And in the wintertime, we all worked together. We had no problems down there. There's probably more fishermen the last time when we rebuilt it than we did this time. And the last time we completely tore the pier down. The whole thing was gone. We didn't have any problems with that. We really didn't. We don't have any problem with parking. The fishermen, we all worked together, and Proc did it the last time, and we didn't have any problems with them. We really didn't. I don't think that's really anything. And as far as parking goes down there, anywhere you go on the coast of Maine, parking's at a premium.
Yeah.
And we have no place to expand down there. There's, where are we gonna expand the parking to? We don't own any more land down there. But I'm not worried about fishermen getting along or anything down there. We'll be fine with that. That's not a problem.
Good.
But they didn't even provide us with bait shed the last time. We left our bait outdoors. It was in the winter. Doesn't matter. So I don't see that as a problem.
Thank you very much.
Good evening. My name is Ed Hutchins. I am the Vice Chairman of the Board of Selectmen, and I'm also proud to say I'm a fifth-generation lobsterman out of Cape Porpoise. My family's been fishing off that pier for over 120 years. And as I look out into the audience tonight, I can see others who could make the same claim. So those who speak to you this evening certainly know what they're talking about. Cape Porpoise Pier serves about 50 fishermen, and our numbers have slowly been shrinking over the decades. The state of Maine has a very restrictive licensing system, so it's not like the old days when I got my license, you just send in your $93 and they send you back a license. In order to get a lobster license, you have to go through a multi-year apprenticeship program, and if you are under 23 and a full-time student, you'll get a license. If you are over that age, you go on a waiting list, and the waiting list has been averaging about 10 years. So we won't have increased activity in Cape Porpoise. That's really not going to be an issue. The only commercial fishery that's really viable today is lobstering. That's our primary source of commercial fishermen at the Cape Porpoise Pier. We certainly are in need of repair. In my 9 years on the Board of Selectmen, we have been working to rehab the entire harbor in 2020. In 2020, we went through the Army Corps of Engineers process, and they completely did a redredge of Cape Porpoise Harbor. The last one they did, when I was just a little kid, lasted 45 years. So hopefully this one will outlast most of us. I don't know that they'll ever do it again, but we said that before. As far as increased activity, again, we're not going to see that. It does get congested in front of the pier, and putting another much longer float on the south end of the pier makes a lot of sense. we'll have fuel down there. There'll be a little bit more tie-up. When the boats come in, at the end of the day, they tend to fuel up, not every day, but every 2 or 3 days perhaps. But every day we take our bait off or put bait on for morning, depending on the season. Obviously, in the winter, we can keep it on. As Peter said, we can leave it right outside. You don't want to do that in July, but you certainly can do that in the wintertime. So that will free up a lot of space for us. We had as I said, I've been on the Board of Selectmen for about 9 years, and in 2018, we asked the residents of the town their opinions of what was important to them. And, climate change was important, but I was surprised. It was either number 1 or the number 2, was the continuation of commercial fishing in town. And it was over 75% of the respondents said that was very important to them. And we are very, very close to making this happen. We've been putting away $100,000 a year for the last 7 years in the budget. So every year, I've seen most of you at the town meeting. We've all had our opportunities to vote it up or down, and it's certainly been well supported within our community. So I think that that speaks volumes for what we'd like to accomplish down there. As far as the parking goes, the Board of Selectmen have addressed that. And we found that the system that we have, as totally inefficient as it is the best system that we have. As Warner had alluded to, if we striped it out down there, we'd probably lose at least a third of the parking. And we all leave our keys in our vehicles, because some days I might have to park behind Peter, or he might have to park behind me. And if I get in before him, I don't want to have to wait till he gets in. So, we work together. That's not been a major issue down at the pier. And as far as I understand Mr. Perloff's concerns about cameras, but having been, again, through the Army Corps of Engineers process, it's not a matter of months, it's a matter of years. And if you think you're going to run anything in the mud across the harbor, that's a pipe dream as far as, quick turnaround on permitting. And I just don't want to be watched. I think, do you guys want to be watched? Do you want somebody, to be able to see what we're doing all the time? What happened to individual freedoms and, some anonymity in this world? I don't have any social media accounts because I don't really want the rest of the world to know what I'm doing. If I want you to know what I'm doing, I'll tell you. And so, to that effect, I think putting cameras on, which, we've had cameras down there, they don't last very long. The ocean is a horrible environment for anything electronic. So I wouldn't, I would ask you not to make that a requirement of our permit. I don't know, as a member of the Board of Selectmen, if you have any questions for me, but I believe in being brief and to the point, and I hope that I have been.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Alan Daggett, Kennebunkport Selectman. This has been a long time in coming. A lot of these people in this room have spent a lot of time trying to put everything together to make it be a perfect rehab of Kennebunkport, Cape Porpoise Pier. There's a lot of things that they've said tonight, and I guess I'm going to be brief, but there is a couple things that I want to say. There's about over 100 people in Kennebunkport, Cape Porpoise, that goes lobstering, fishing, and not only them, not only the fishermen's families, you have a lot of other families in this town that's reliable. They want that, they really need the pier to be functional and safe. You have the hotels that depend on us. You have the restaurants. You have all the help that go into these restaurants, hotels. You have the seafood dealers. You have the seafood shops. There's so many people that are affected by that pier. It's a major part of the backbone of Kennebunkport. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. John Noonan. I'm a third-generation lobsterman out of Cape Porpoise. The facility we have now is not efficient whatsoever. It's completely deteriorating. For me, as a commercial fisherman that uses this pier, this is where I bring my catch in. I bring it to the local restaurants, bring it to my family's restaurant. For my age, as one of the younger fishermen down there, the pier we have now, it won't last. For me to keep my business running and operational, we need this pier to be rebuilt and, brought up and made better. Hopefully, all passes.
Okay. So, do we have any hands raised?
There are no remote hands
No remote
raised.
hands, so if we have no other comments from the public, I guess I can close the public hearing. So, Larry, do you have enough, do you have the information you need? Is there's some particular thing, there's some things you asked him to modify?
Yeah, I can recap, yeah. So I just have another couple of comments regarding the proposal for a camera. To me, that's a scope change, and like Ed said, I think it's much more significant than just a couple of weeks. I've been involved in some things like this, and my perception is it's definitely a scope change, and really it should probably be a whole separate submission, a whole separate project, which anytime you start running wires across a channel, somebody's going to drag a anchor through there at some point, or something's going to happen. It's not going to last. So, I see this as not very desirable. But that's not up to me. I'm just saying, based on some prior experience, it's a separate project. Okay. And then I did have one other question. So, on the riprap, what was the slope you were going to put on that? Is that 1-to-1 or two horizontal to one vertical on your riprap?
So we're trying to get it in at 2-to-1.
2-to-1. That's two horizontal to one vertical.
That's the most desirable.
I agree with that. That's good.
Yeah.
Thank you. But no, I got everything I need.
Okay, there were some.
Well, I was going to recap. Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
So
specifics he has to change.
yeah, I'm just gonna recap my request. Okay. So you're gonna revise the letter of authorization, clarifying Lori Smith's role in the authorization. Then you're going to change the Kennebunk to Kennebunkport, right? Then you're going to show drawing B3 with various elevations shown, original average ground level, and then the 30-foot, wherever the 30-foot maximum height would be, just for reference, as well as the top of the building. You may as well put that in there too. And then you were going to provide the storm study with the data. I mean, that's just for interest. So those are 1, 2, 3, 4, I guess four major items.
Okay, so can you have those items clearly, several of them can be answered tomorrow, but can you provide everything we need before the next meeting?
Yeah, I'll get those to Warner. I'm sorry.
Microphone.
So I'll provide the information to Warner.
That's great, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. So, okay, sure. So how do we handle it?
Can I just, one more follow-up? I think Larry said it right, that the camera issue is separate scope from this application.
It has nothing to do with this.
Having said that, I just want to, again, say that I think one of the benefits that we provide here is a public forum, and I think you'll find some people support the idea, and obviously not everyone. I think the town, the applicant, should take it under their own advisement as to whether this is an effective tool for supervising the construction and possibly supervising the use of the facility after it's constructed and, going forward. Whether or not you run a wire out to the island, That's just part of it, right? All right, so maybe that's a long-term addition, maybe it's something that never comes to fruition. But certainly incorporating cameras into the design and placement of this new structure, running whatever wiring needs to be done, this is the time to look at it, and it's not a big cost driver. So, my 2 cents. I don't think the planning board needs to consider it anymore.
It's not going to be part of this application.
Correct.
That's the main thing, yeah.
Anything that we need to talk about again, but
Yeah.
it's important to have it as part of our public forum.
Right, thank you.
Okay, so, I guess we need to get that information and we can approve
Approve the application when we get the information?
next
But
time, and
I could-
probably
I
read
could
the.
probably read the FOF next time, yeah.
FOF at that point.
I think so, yeah.
Well, can I offer that the things you asked for were very specific, and I think you had agreement that they're going to be provided.
Yeah.
Can we approve this conditional on
Conditional
Oh, I guess we could do that, yeah.
that information being provided in the next few days? And then we
2
can get
weeks from now, we
started
just
and
read the
read the
FOF
findings.
and sign
Yeah.
it, and we're great.
Yeah,
Good
that'd be
stuff.
good.
Okay.
So Ed, was that a proposal?
I would move to approve this application pending completion of the 3 or 4 items that Larry's asked for.
That's great. Okay. I'll
I
second.
second.
Okay. Scott is seconding.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye, yes.
Okay, so it's approved.
Mr. Chairman?
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, before everybody leaves, I wanted to point out, especially with Town Manager Laurie Smith here,
Oh.
we're down one
Down
member
one,
on the planning
yes.
board.
And
So,
there's 2 selectmen to.
yeah,
Further
and
say
2
that.
selectmen. We're down 1 member of the planning board. So if not you, who would really like to spend 2 Wednesdays a month here, talk to somebody else, talk to friends and neighbors who really need another person on the board, because we almost missed a quorum.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Good evening. The meeting is not adjourned, by the way, but we get the real fun stuff of going over. So,
Tom, can you call to order?
Yeah,
Can you call to order?
right. We'll just give them a couple minutes to clear out. Yeah.
They know that the meeting's going on.
I know. Give them a couple minutes to clear out.
You did. I can give you a more formal one.
I have gotten a list of 3. They have 3 people who have come forward. Yes, there
You have to go home, but you can't stay here.
Right, that's right. Yeah, head to the nearest bar. Or the nearest boat with a bottle. Okay.
That's where he was hiding.
That's right. It's not closing time yet.
And no chair for you. Boy,
Pilot house about to get busy though.
good idea. Make him stand for the whole time.
I'd sign off on a liquor license here.
A liquor license at the fire station.
That could make
can
a
tell
more
you live in
interesting
Kennebunk.
meeting. That would get us another member of the planning board.
Get you another planning
Might get
board.
me here more often.
Yeah,
That
for all
does-
when we discuss the,
I want
PBRs and
to
stuff,
ask,
you know,
I
it's
sent this late. Does everybody have a copy? Do you want a copy?
I read it.
I have a printed copy.
What do you propose we do with it?
You can throw it in the wastebasket. I
No,
don't
at
care.
this meeting. What are you thinking we're going to do here?
Well, one of the things we have on our agenda is to consider the comprehensive plan parts of it. And the last meeting.
Hold a second. One talker, huh? You're speaking?
Sorry,
Go
no,
ahead.
we're just coordinating logistics. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
The last meeting, I said that I would put together a statement as a forward
Yes.
for the comprehensive plan because I felt that people need to look at the parts of the plan not as specific things that apply to them or don't apply to them, but apply to the town as the whole and as it's moving forward in the natural world and everything else around it that interacts with it.
I'm gonna try one Zoom, and yeah.
But is this something,
So why are we looking at it?
yeah, that's the question. I mean, other than cursory, we can all look at it and say it looks great, but this is something you're.
If the if the planning board is in favor of it, then I think Eli wrote to me and said that the people who deal with the comprehensive plan, the growth planning committee, would be more likely to consider it as part of the comprehensive plan. So it is up to you. I put it together, it is up to you.
But this is for, what's the title of this? What's the?
I didn't put a title on it, I put it, it's meant to be an overview for the comprehensive plan.
All right.
It's kind of a macro overview.
Okay.
It's like the intro to the intro.
There's no
Right.
specifics.
Right.
Okay. Well, so, and this was requested by Eli?
No, I suggested
No.
You
it.
suggested?
And Eli suggested I put something in writing.
Okay, I got you.
Do you
So now
need a
want-
printed
so-
copy?
So now you want feedback. Get the
If we're
idea.
gonna review it, I need a printed copy, but
Do you need a printed copy?
I'm just questioning the process here.
Well-
We're just
We
looking
just
at this
got it
for the
yesterday.
first
Well,
time,
so
this
what-
morning.
This afternoon. So.
Yeah, so what we would like to get accomplished, this evening is just to finish going over the goals that we have, that have been assigned to the planning board.
I thought we finished that, no?
I think we still had
That was the first half, and tonight we'll complete.
Okay.
And then that'll be
Yeah.
done. And then, in addition, Nina had said that she wanted to offer some suggested language to incorporate somewhere in the document.
I would say, given that we just got the suggested language, that we do individually respond to Nina with
Yeah.
comments and get, she can provide the sense of the planning board to give it out to the
Yeah,
the
that's
growth
fine.
planning.
Yeah, and then we're
Meantime,
happy to
for
pass
tonight,
that.
we can just review the,
So Tom, is it the intent that Nina is authoring a planning board input to the comprehensive plan, or is this a Nina input to the comprehensive plan?
It can be a planning board input.
I know it can be, but it isn't
It can als-
yet.
It
If
can
we review it,
also be my input. If you don't like it, I can take it and just submit it to the growth planning committee as is.
I'm being misunderstood.
I think the idea is that Nina is offering that option to the board. If the board wishes to have the planning board's name associated with it, it would be, up to your decision whether to do that or not. And if not, then Nina could simply submit it with her own name.
Right.
Okay. I know I will review it differently, given what the intent is.
Yeah, does that make sense?
I'm not understanding what the intent is yet.
So the, let's see.
Right, it's the old, if you want me to sign it, then I'm gonna look at it differently.
I think that's the idea, is that Nina's presented it to the board so that the board has an opportunity to sign their name to it. Is
Why
that,
not sign your name
or
to
not.
it?
yeah, or not?
Yeah.
Okay.
This is a pretty color one, I printed it upstairs.
Wow. Yeah.
I can read the black and white.
You gotta get back in the swing, Gentlemen in the hallway, we cannot have the crosstalk and noise. Please close the door or leave the building.
Oh, I like that statement.
pass it. Thank you.
Oh, you got a copy? Well, I printed it out. I get, is it the latest? I don't know. That would be that would be late. You received it in your email. I received it in the email, yes.
Perfect.
All right.
Lost our planner.
So similarly to the last time, I think what we just did is we just talked through the strategies here, and so we'll go from there. So Eli, these are the so these 2 pages are just the remaining strategies that we have.
Yeah, shouldn't take too long.
Yep. So we're in the transportation section, I think is where we likely left off here.
I think, I can't quite say, I think it's the energy, it's that orange section that's on the screen.
Oh, excuse me. Okay.
So which number is that?
Here, I'll tell you in 1 second. So we'll be starting with the economy section, which is in like a gray blue. It's at the bottom of the screen there. I'll advance that screen.
That's fine, it's not on here, let's continue.
What did it say?
Yeah, I think we've got some different dates. The one that I'm seeing on the screen here has a 5/4/2022 date, and I have one that's a 4/21.
I got 421 as well.
Yeah, 4/21 date.
Mine says 5/4.
This is great.
5/4.
This is
Oh, you
my
have a
fault.
5/4.
My fault.
Meeting date, 5/4.
Starts in transportation.
Mine says 5/4.
Mine says 421.
Right there?
Yeah. Yeah, let's make sure we get the right.
No, that was my fault.
You got the special.
Okay.
Yeah, it says 5/4.
Okay.
That's the meeting date, and 4/21 is the,
Oh, yeah, all right, okay. Yeah, the meeting date 5/4, yeah, but 421.
Oh, I'm sorry, down here is 4.
Right, yeah.
Here is-
Yeah, I see, yeah, we got meeting date 5/4
That's
up
what's
top.
going on. So you can average those.
right in the middle.
So we'll be beginning on goal number 29,
Okay.
if you want to start there.
Yeah.
All right. So as we did before, I'll just, grab the strategy, read it, and then if we have any, any thoughts or changes, that we want to discuss, then just, feel free to speak up. If not, then I'm just going to move along to the next one. So, number 30, which is the policy, develop a connected network of streets and destinations. First strategy for that is add criteria and subdivision regs that promote shared driveways and require developer to show future connectivity to adjacent parcels, including roads and trails. The responsible party is planning department and the planning board for that. And just as a matter of background, there is some language that, that exists within the subregs. And then, but I think that's probably one of those ones that,
Yeah.
probably likely needs a little bit, needs to be brought maybe to the
Be tweaked
forefront.
Anyway, we
Yep.
currently have to waive something to use a shared driveway, so.
Right.
So the shared driveway has come up numerous times, and I think that would be a straightforward thing to do. This future connectivity to adjacent parcels, I can't recall us ever wrestling with that,
Yeah, I mean, it's
imagining what it would be.
it's a common plan strategy whenever you look at adjacent undeveloped properties, that may be developed in the future to provide for future connectivity and access so that you don't necessarily wind up with multiple, multiple curb cuts.
With
Yeah.
the,
right,
with those
right.
selectmen saying that we never accept roads and make sure you declare all roads are private, that becomes hard also.
Right, yep. So yeah, I mean, there is language currently, but I think,
Okay.
as we noted, it's something that should be looked at and maybe tweaked, so.
Good.
Next policy, enhance access to waterfront, recreation, and other amenities. Review and make recommendations for, I'm not sure that this one fits here. Review and make recommendations for off-street parking requirements for residential use.
Which doesn't seem to
Yeah,
talk about waterfront at all.
yeah. Yeah. Well, we'll take a look at that piece. So, yeah, I mean,
That
it's.
doesn't make a lot of sense. The only way it even makes any sense is to get off-street parking if there's already a public road and you're trying to make it more available to visitors to
Well,
these areas.
Ultimately, really what this, so take out of the equation, the policy that talks about waterfront rec, and other amenities, but, a common thing that planners, struggle with has been parking requirements. Because in many ways, and I think what we found is that, a lot of performance standards have a large excess in parking. And so I think what this, is asking for is to, take a look at those types of uses.
Yeah.
We don't necessarily see a lot of multifamily development in town, and that's really where you start to come across that, where, requiring, in excess of, sometimes 2 or 3 parking spaces per unit is really an excess that's not, that practically speaking has been shown to not be necessary.
Werner, when I looked at this, I'm thinking that it's talking about some public parking lots.
That's what it looks like to me.
Off-street parking
Well,
for residents
so
to
when-
use, to use the beach or to use the, waterfront.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that it's, no, I
That's not
wouldn't,
why it's there?
no, I wouldn't take it that way. It's more of the sense of on-site parking requirements, that happen for a use on a lot.
So I think this
it's a
needs to be
good
removed
strategy
then.
to go somewhere else,
Yeah,
not under
yeah,
that-
we'll take a look
under
and,
that policy.
yeah, we'll take a look and see, well, yeah, I 100% agree that it's not in the right policy.
If you increase
Right.
your off-street parking, you increase your impervious areas quite often.
Exactly, yes, and I think that's part of the reason, that's one of the reasons why, there's this recommendation to look at it, because it's, it's not only just a matter of, do we have excessive on-site parking requirements, but it's also in that same vein to look at, can we reduce, the need for these impervious areas? Obviously, you don't eliminate them, but there may be opportunities for reduction. But we'll take a look at that and see that gets fit into under the correct policy. Next, policy, maintain compatibility between transportation infrastructure and surroundings. Strategy there, investigate the merits of separate roadway design standards for designated rural and growth areas for subdivisions, planning board and planning department.
Fine.
And then again, this would be, something that we could look at within the subregs.
Yeah, we don't have designated the designation of rural and growth areas, we don't really have that.
Yep.
Either, so. It's fine.
Yep. Next strategy, consider identifying scenic byways for future preservation. We have that as planning board and planning department. And that, this is more of a, I think a global exercise as opposed to a specific performance standard.
Conservation Commission wouldn't have to do that.
It's not necessarily within their scope.
Okay.
Would that include saltwater marshes and wetlands in terms of not allowing docks in there because they're scenic?
Well, this just asks for the consideration of identifying them. You know, I think your next step then is whether or not, you know, you start talking about
Definition.
activities.
Definition of basically preserving the scenic area.
Yeah, so this strategy, again, like I said, is just the identification piece.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I understand.
Next goal, reducing impacts to infrastructure due to climate change. The policy there is integrate climate risk assessment and adaptation planning into prospective transportation projects. First strategy, recommend where appropriate the reduction of width standards for roads that serve multiple buildings as a strategy to reduce impervious surfaces. And yeah, again, in a similar vein in terms of what we've just talked about for, you know, for the potential for subdivision regs.
Well, it's gotta be building department has to be in there too, right? Whenever we deal with road widths,
That's right. Yeah, I mean, we kind of use planning department and code enforcement officer. I mean, those are, you know, I mean.
but, you know,
it's-
like the,
Yep.
highway,
I'll grab a different hat.
Yeah.
You know, and
highway folks have to talk about
Yep.
it too, but they're planning department for this purpose. Okay.
Yep.
So Werner, the idea on that number 46 is if you didn't pave it over, then it's gonna remain grassy, is that the idea? I mean, whenever you.
People drive on the grassy.
I'm sorry.
Well, whenever.
Is this 46 or 47?
Number 46, recommend where appropriate the reduction of width standards for
Yep.
roads. You know, there's some lower bound you can't go below, right? And
Right.
of course, reduction in width implies reduction in speed, which is kind of incidental to my question, but my question is, so the idea is you're going to make the roads narrower, presuming that the shoulder's gonna be grassy? Is that the idea?
I wouldn't presume that. I think this is more just in the vein of looking at, you know, looking at the road, you know, looking at these entrance width requirements and asking the question, you know, are they excessively wide in terms of what we have for the requirements, or are there opportunities to narrow those up with the idea of reducing impervious surfaces? I think at that point, you then potentially trip into, you know, so what do you do with the shoulders? You know, does that mean because a gravel shoulder isn't necessarily going to be classified as impervious, you know, for that, as opposed to a grass shoulder. But I think that's a valid question that you could get into then under this strategy.
It might also tie into the strategy or the policy, develop a connected network of streets and destinations. Some of the vision for the town parcel included more of a village-like atmosphere where there were sort of little alleyways and houses close to each other and maybe a road connecting them in back that was, you know, attractive and suitable.
Right. Yep.
All of this is,
40 feet wide.
George, all of this is looking like something that in a year, we're going to come back and read this and say, how does this make sense? Remember, the goal here, number 41, is to reduce impacts to infrastructure. Okay?
Yep.
I'm not sure what that means. It's pretty,
Climate change.
it's pretty general. And then the policy to achieve that goal is to integrate a risk assessment and planning into transportation projects. I'm not sure what a transportation project is, but whatever those are, when we have one, we're going to look at them and do some planning and assessment in order to reduce impacts to infrastructure. And then, what does that have to do with reducing the width standards and impervious material? None of these seem to hang together in my mind. I can't see the theme of how these strategies serve that policy and addresses that goal.
I agree.
It's disjointed.
Yeah.
Yeah, should change the goal,
Well,
Move the goalposts.
move the goalpost. Something's wrong here, Eli, that's all I'm saying.
Well, let's say the floodwaters rose and they stayed there.
Well,
And the bridge down by the DCI
on South Main Street. I just love South Main Street. It's the best example on the planet. And we've got to redo a structure there so that people who are now landlocked down at Cape Arundel can make it up to town. Would it benefit us to allow to just build a one-lane road, because let's face it, most of the town's emptied out down there? Or are we gonna have to go into some massive infrastructure where just a simple army pontoon might suffice?
So, okay, that's a good story. I like that. You're saying,
Well,
here-
I wanna
here's,
be able to get
here,
to town.
here's a no, but it's a hypothetically, you're saying redoing South Main would be a prospective transportation project.
Let's say,
Here.
especially that bridge, that sounds like a transportation project. No one notices.
We're guessing,
Yeah.
you know, but, and that would be, we don't want to, we want to reduce the impact to infrastructure when we take on that project. And the way we do that is to look at reducing the width standards and encouraging builders to use and maintain pervious materials.
I think one of the elements here that likely could be reworded
Tail is wagging the
is the
dog.
policy here that talks about prospective transportation projects, because
It needs a definition.
yeah, well, and I think, I think what we're hearing here, these are, these strategies don't really tie into transportation projects in terms of what we're thinking about. These are, under the planning board's purview, you're dealing with site plan applications. You're not dealing with a transportation project. And so, we may just look at changing that, integration of climate risk assessment and adaptation planning into, site plan, into a site plan review standard.
If that's the intent, I just hate to be backing into guessing what the authors meant.
Understood.
That's
Yeah.
all. Clarity
But I
of
don't-
vision.
Yeah, I don't disagree that that if you try to tie that strategy necessarily back, that it's a little bit disjointed. But
I know when I joined the planning board and talked to Tom about that, he brought me on board, we looked at the comprehensive plan, the 10-year-old one, and looked at the goals in there and the ones that were assigned to the planning board, and we both were scratching our heads. And it started with, what do you think they meant? And I don't want to go reaffirm that. Most of what we've done here, I can actually understand it and hang my hat on it. This little section here is the exception to that.
yeah, yeah. And again, some of these are more in terms of just, direction, direction statements that would, that could translate into a performance standard.
Do you think that if you look back at your notes and the minutes from the meeting where these went into effect, you might find some context for them that would help us?
Perhaps.
Yeah. No, well, and I think here just, changing prospective transportation project instead into site plan review applications could clarify that.
Yeah.
So when I read the strategies, what comes to mind is the goal is actually configure infrastructure recognizing climate change. Because you're not reducing impacts to infrastructure, you're making it.
Well, I figured this must be existing
It's just
infrastructure.
impacts to-
Yeah.
George's Bridge, I liked that
Yeah, the George's
analogy.
Bridge, yeah.
If you investigate the concrete, a chick has carved his name into the side of it when that bridge was last done in 1920-something.
Come on, I'm trying to give you a heritage here, George. George's Bridge. I like it.
But
Yeah.
if that bridge had to be rebuilt, should it be raised up and level?
But if it were, it would never be coming to the planning board.
No.
So,
And- But there you go, Weston.
that's, anyway.
Yeah. Again, that's why what I'm saying, pull this into a
What
into
makes sense to
site
planning
plan,
board.
right, into site,
But
into
then the
site
goal
plan
doesn't
review.
make sense because
How
we're not
would it
going to
affect
reduce
parking at
the
the fish
effect.
pier in Cape Porpoise?
We're stuck, guys.
Yep.
Tick-tock.
So, let's move along, with this. We'll take a look at, again, keep in mind, you're looking at this, you're looking at three strategies, from a section that probably has maybe 5 or 6 other ones located within them. So you don't have kind of the benefit of the entire document. Otherwise, we'd be,
That would make
We'd be
it
here
a
for
little more
years.
understandable.
Sure.
Maybe.
Yeah. It's just that it's not the process that we've undertaken here. We've, where we've been bringing just the specific goals to,
Yep.
to the affected parties. But I think if we just change that more specifically to, a site plan reference, if that makes sense, Eli.
Mm-hmm. Yep, sounds good.
All right, let's move into hazard mitigation. Goal there is mitigate vulnerability to natural hazards, human-made hazards, and climate change. Policy there is increase community resilience to climate change impacts. And the strategy of identify cost-effective opportunities when extending public sewer, water, and sidewalks when reviewing development proposals. Planning Board and Planning Department.
Look fine.
Mhm.
Okay.
I just point out to you, after that discussion, you will need to consider, by making that change, do you affect strategies 43, 44,
Yeah, right, we'll look at the,
45,
we'll look at
because,
the rest of them.
yeah,
Yep,
okay.
right, to make sure that that still aligns. Yep.
Okay.
Next, future land use. Goal, ensure orderly growth and prevent sprawl. Policy here, encourage growth adjacent to current village centers. Growth should be compatible with and integrated with the existing infrastructure and built environment. So the strategy there is to incorporate traditional neighborhood design principles in the subdivision regulations for growth areas. That's Planning Board and Planning Department.
And are those a known standard, the TNDs?
Right, so generally speaking, what you're looking at there they are more of a performance-based, they're a form-based type code.
Architects would know about these, for example?
That's right, yes. Yeah, and in a form-based code, you're, instead of focusing and fixating more on, your typical space and bulk standards of, you have a lot that's X by X with this setback and that setback to it, is that you provide more architectural direction and design in terms of, how the buildings interact with each other. And so, again, that it's again, primarily more form-based than it is just, what we currently have in our zoning.
So this might be something, for example, that tied in with the sketch plan review that we did of the site out on Mills Road.
I think it's something
Not
that
too long ago.
you might, so let's, we'll give an example, is that you may have, let's say you wind up with a condominium development that is
Yeah.
a cluster housing, as an example. Right. Something like that where you have the same builder who's developing the lots, but also developing, the structures,
Maybe a ball field even.
that type of design, would be, that type of situation would be where you would incorporate something like that.
Whereas today, our subdivision regs are largely around individually owned homes that
Correct,
are
that's right, yep, just.
purchased and built up by.
Separate lot divisions, yep, that get developed separately.
Sounds like fun.
Can we go back to the man-made hazards and climate change? Is this the only thing under there? To identify cost-effective opportunities when extending public sewer, water, and sidewalks?
Well, it's the only,
Only one applies to us.
no, it's the only one that's been assigned to the planning board.
Is there anything on incorporate housing design standards to mitigate bird strikes and standards for basically reducing environmental pollution? Those are man-made hazards.
That's a great question. Obviously, I don't have all of the strategies memorized, but we'll take a look at what we have. I mean, there is enough supportive language within the comp plan that could support that type of strategy. But we'll have to take a look to see if there's anything that that fits that.
Building standards and,
Well, building standards as a general rule you're not going to necessarily find building standards like from a code perspective in the comp plan, because that's governed elsewhere. But as far as like design standards from an architectural perspective, that's something different. And I mean, we've seen a lot of language, that talks about, the development of the town's character, and especially as we talk about what development of village parcel might look like, that looks to kind of maintain that particular character.
yeah, well, I would also consider planting and design to, especially tree plantings to sequester carbon and to cool areas.
Yeah, and I think overall, like where the town has a more directed goal in the comp plan to try to mitigate and deal with climate change issues, that those types of things, while you might not find that as a specific line item in here, I think those types of things, are going to be consistent with, with the plan in general, that we can talk about for future performance standards. But if we had to identify at that level everything in the plan, I mean, we already have, gosh, how many strategies do we have, Eli? We've been trying to.
Between 200 and 300.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, we'd have a pretty extensive document. It already is pretty extensive, but.
It's just that the ones you're looking at here are construction standards and so forth. I'd like to see more in terms of, planting natural standards, like design standards and so forth, that just incorporate, keeping the natural world to a standard that, helps the town.
Yeah, I think that's
Avoid
on the next-
pollution.
Some of that's on the next page.
Oh, okay.
And I think some of that you covered in the last one under the natural resources.
With
I think,
some of it.
Yeah, I
With
think
some
it
of
might
it.
just be that it wouldn't be in the hazards chapter. But for example, encourage the use of native plants on public and private property, encourage developers to install street trees, that type of thing.
Yeah, but they also mitigate vulnerability to natural hazards, human-made hazards, and climate change. They
Yeah.
fit naturally into that too.
What we've tried to do with a lot of these is we've worked to eliminate certain redundancies. And so, because you're absolutely right, it may address a couple different issues, but we're working to try to not necessarily have the same or very similar strategies mentioned numerous times. But
Okay. Maybe you need references back to certain sections.
probably.
I could see people holding, one page and then going to the next page.
Yeah, I think we're gonna love word search,
Yeah.
whenever it comes to working through this. But next goal, preserve Kennebunkport's open space and rural character. Policy, identify land that warrants protection and sets priorities. Strategy, support the Kennebunkport Conservation Trust and its goals of connection of open space. That's Planning Board and Planning Department. And then the next strategy on page 2, limit as appropriate allowed uses to those compatible with wildlife, endangered species, and environmentally sensitive areas. It's Planning Board and Planning Department. Next goal, maintain Kennebunkport's small town character. Policy, maintain the aesthetic, historic, and architectural character of Kennebunkport's neighborhoods. Strategy, encourage connecting streets, a pedestrian-friendly environment, and small-scale neighborhood commercial services that are geared towards serving local residents. That's a planning board and planning department. And as I just mentioned, the other one, develop the village parcel in a manner that's consistent with Kennebunkport's small-town character. Planning board and planning department. Next goal, plan for a changing climate. Policy, steer growth away from areas that will be vulnerable to hazards caused by climate change. The strategy there is develop standards for new development in areas that are vulnerable to sea level rise and groundwater rise that is induced by sea level rise. That's planning board and planning department. All right, so that's what we have.
It's not even 9 o'clock yet, so.
Yeah. Lots of work. I can see big scope here.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
so, that being said, I guess I'll accept the,
Wait a
motion
minute.
at this point.
Wait,
Oh,
wait.
Okay.
The printout that I gave you,
Yes.
okay, I want to make one minor change to it,
Okay.
so that you know.
Email a fresh copy.
Okay. And I can just mention it. It's the next to the last statement, sentence in the document, where it says to view. It really should say to focus on. Okay.
Is that, I'm not sure it's a whole sentence, is it?
To focus on each of these steps for their individual consequences, that's where it is.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, it's not productive. Okay. To focus
Right.
on each, okay, gotcha.
Right. Okay.
Okay.
This is really meant to be an overview
Right.
to the comprehensive plan.
Right.
So
Right.
people aren't looking at each individual one and thinking how it pertains to them
Yes.
or their business, and saying, I reject this one because it will affect my business. You have to think of the whole town and how it fits into the natural environment. That's all I'm trying to get at,
Yep.
okay?
Okay.
That's all I want to
Can
say.
I ask, are the comments on this, can we reply all? Can we do an interactive discussion on this, or are we restricted to sending comments just back to Nina?
Comments just back to Nina.
Back to Nina.
Yeah.
So I think that if the intent of this is to come from the planning board, we need a working session. Because I don't think that we can turn this into something that represents the planning board's view with sending comments,
Okay.
annotated comments back to
Bill,
Nina.
you said something about May 10th in one of your emails.
Well, May 10th is the next date that the Growth Planning Committee is meeting.
Okay.
I suppose if,
What if we just said the planning board is considering it? Considering the statement.
Considering
It
this.
would be
Yeah.
faster if it was just submitted as this was your submission.
Right.
rather
I
than
can
from the
submit it
planning
as
board.
my submission.
If you
And
submit as
just
your
simply
submission.
say that the planning board is also
That
considering
we're all
it.
considering it.
Okay,
Yes.
Would that be
That would
good?
be.
that would
Oh, yeah.
work.
That's
Because
fine.
In fact,
we could tie up for a
I
while.
like that, in that then we would schedule a session, just like the one we just had, maybe a half hour, where we talk through.
Might be 45 minutes.
so would that
Might
be
only
on
be 20.
your May 18th meeting? Would
I
that
just
be your
know.
next meeting?
So just for the
Yeah.
avoidance of doubt here, I look at this and I like the substance of this note, but I would want it, if it came from the planning board, to be put in a positive light. And I would want to remove the statements that say things like, to many, this may look this way, but it's not. I just want to say what it's intended to be. I'd like to simplify it. I'd
Sure.
like it to be a visionary statement, which is what I think the guts of this are.
So I guess my only concern is just the schedule of timing.
Of course.
If the board wants to have workshop on it, that would be your next regularly scheduled meeting would be May 18th. That is gonna be after the Growth Planning Committee has their final meeting.
So I think maybe this needs to come just from Nina then.
Yeah, send it from Nina.
You know, the only other, I guess, possibility is is this even possible if the members of the board just attended a growth planning committee meeting?
Well, that would go quickly.
And then,
Yeah, I think, you
Yeah.
know, in terms of the time frame, I think, you know, the recommendation that, you know, I think that Nina could submit this to the growth planning committee individually, I think is fine.
I do too.
Yep.
okay.
You know,
Why don't I just do
As
that?
could
Yeah.
any other member of the board or citizens of the town.
absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Thanks all. We appreciate the,
Committed as vice chairman of the planning board, but
I could submit it as vice chair of the planning board and simply say that, in reviewing the comprehensive plan as we have and so forth, this is a personal opinion, basically.
Because the 10th is 6 days from now.
yeah,
Yeah,
so she can do that.
yeah, so that I don't imply that the planning board has approved it or anything
I
like
think
that.
that's fine.
That's good.
And that members of the planning board have copies that they're considering as well. Okay?
That sounds fine. Excellent. All right,
Motion to adjourn?
Second?
all in favor?
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Yep.
We're done.